I want to welcome everybody to this morning's committee hearing. It is April 15th, tax day, as I was reminded by my president. Now, I don't know why you would tell me today. You should have told me last week.
Well, you're so far ahead, don't
But I've done that. So anyway, what we're going to do, Mr. City Attorney, is we will operate as a communique from the chair. I think the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to have, I have one public comment. Can I have Mr. Tennant?
Sure.
Chuck, your leadoff hitter.
Oh, is this for public?
Public comment.
Well,
Your leadoff hitter today.
okay.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see the committee members. You know, the forthcoming 1999 state law MLPA closing down our recreational resources off Southern California. To date, $120 million was brought in by private and public funding. No one knows where it came from. No one knows how it's being used. And when it's implemented, the process is done, it's going to cost $40 million a year to monitor it thereafter. And yet in 1999, it was $250,000 to monitor it. Yet the state has no money, no budget, and no plan. Who's going to pay for it? And we will. And it will be a major effect on Southern California. And they're saying that in California, $100 million in the local economy, $20,000 in loss of city tax revenue, loss of business, trade, commerce, recreational industry, and they're using politics and not policy, and the public is not being made aware of it, yet the supporters plan to get some of the stimulus money to reimburse them for the interest, for their interest, which is in the interest of a few and not everyone's interest. And it makes no sense, none at all, to push through this unwarranted, massive closures that's going to affect us, because there's more pressing issues at stake, like loss of housing, loss of jobs, foreclosures, no budget, health care, a lot of things that are more important. And these people want to do these massive things, and I'm telling you, it's going to hit Southern California in this city, and we're all going to have to pay, and we're all going to get less. And you know what? It's important, and it's the funding. It needs to be publicly made, where it came from, how they're using it. A lot of things are going on, and we need city leaders' help. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. It's always a pleasure to see you. Okay, Ms. Barclay, let's run through items 1 through 7 quickly.
Yes, sir. Item 1 is a report from the Community Redevelopment Agency and the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to increasing funding for lead-based paint testing and hazardous materials abatement services on an as-needed basis for various demolition, rehabilitation, and paint-is-free programs for the period ending June 30th, 2009.
Okay, on that item, we'll adopt the CLA report as a communique from the chair. It brings us to item 2.
Item 2 is a report from the CRA and the City Administrative Officer relative to renewing and awarding annual purchase orders and contracts for various goods and services.
Okay, we'll adopt the CAO report on that item. Item 3, we will continue. So item 4.
Item 4 is a report from the CRA and the CAO relative to a cooperation agreement with the Department of General Services to provide as-needed construction services and related actions.
Okay, we'll adopt the CAO report on that item. Brings us to item 5.
Item 5 is reports from the CRA and the CLA relative to environmental effects of the project and a loan agreement with Vista Alegre LC for the development of the Toberman Village.
We'll adopt the CLA report on that item. Item 6.
Item 6 are reports from the CRA and the CAO relative to the assignment of a purchase order for legal services related to the Industrial Service Oil Company litigation.
Okay, on item 6, we'll adopt the CAO report. That brings us to item number 7.
Item 7 is a motion, Weston Garcetti, relative to authorizing the Los Angeles Housing Department to hire a consultant to review the Technical Advisory Task Force pro forma and other recommendations that may inform a citywide mixed-income housing ordinance.
Mr. City Attorney, who's the maker of the motion?
It's the Honorable Chair of this committee, sir.
And who seconded the motion?
the president of the council.
So what do you think we ought to do with this?
Probably approve it.
Based
As a
on
communication.
recommendations from my lawyer, we will adopt this item. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Okay, that brings us to item 9, because Mr. Garcetti, I believe you have to go to another meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
So why don't we read item 9, and
Item 9 is a report from the city attorney on an ordinance relative to adding Article 7.2 to Chapter 4 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code to regulate mortgage modification consultants.
please come forward, the city departments. I've got to go hug a woman.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
So should we knock out public comment real quick? Mr. Chair, you want to do public comment first? Do you want to take the
I'm
presentation?
sorry for the delay.
No.
It's a
It's a good hug.
dear friend of mine.
She's a good hugger.
She's a good person. Well, you want to do public comment first, or you want to listen to the presentation, or we can do public
Well,
comment.
sure.
We can do public comment first. Is that Lenora Friedman? Please come forward, and then Antonio Hicks. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to address 3 provisions in the ordinance that I think are particularly valuable and important for our community. First of all, the ordinance proposes to extend the protections of the statute to the pre-notice of default time period. In other words, if a homeowner is facing foreclosure, even if they haven't received a notice of default, this ordinance would govern the activities of foreclosure consultants. And this protection is not in place right now. It is particularly crucial because homeowners who anticipate foreclosure but are not yet in default have a much harder time getting the attention of the lenders, and so they're particularly vulnerable to foreclosure consultants who tell them that they need to retain someone to help them get the attention of lenders because they're not in default. They often then urge them to stop making their mortgage payments, so they end up in default, which just brings them closer to the foreclosure process. But it's particularly important that if they're going to be getting advice during this time period, that they be from qualified people and that there's a contract that they can rescind. This is a very anxious time period for people who are particularly vulnerable, and another provision in the ordinance allows them the right to rescind, and this is crucial so that they can, if they sign something, they can think about it and have a change of heart. Finally, the attorney's fees and treble damages are a very important remedy that gives teeth to the ordinance that, otherwise people will think they can breach without any kind of consequence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, as the committee knows, Neighborhood Legal Services is...
Identify yourself.
Oh, yes, my name's Antonio Hicks. I represent Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles County, and as the committee knows, we've been involved in foreclosure prevention work for some time now. So we've seen a lot of this, and we see it as a pervasive and growing problem, and I'd like to echo her statements, but also focus on a couple other provisions that we believe will be very helpful in stemming this type of activity. The one thing that we see a lot is, because there's so many of these cases, and there's usually, I guess, for the individuals, a lot of money involved, but certainly overall not a lot of money involved. We can't justify, trying to sue all these guys. We ended up having to counsel them to go to small claims court. And often when they get there, because there has been no written contract, and it's not technically illegal to charge upfront fees before the notice of default has been filed, then it's emboldened a lot of these these so-called foreclosure consultants. In fact, I've had clients tell me that they've confronted these individuals and said, well, we're going to sue you in small claims, and they pull out some kind of file and say, go ahead. I've beaten 3 or 4 people in small claims court. So we feel that the requirement that there's a written contract, as well as that it's in the language that is used to negotiate, will be very helpful going forward, so that these individuals can successfully sue in small claims court.
Thank you. John Brady and Chuck Tennant, you're next, Chuck. Morning.
Good morning. I'm John Brady, the Housing Policy Coordinator in the Mayor's Office of housing and economic opportunity, and I'd like to thank Council President Garcetti and the members of HCED for moving so thoughtfully and decisively to address one of the more harmful byproducts of the foreclosure crisis, these loan modification scams. These scams are a particularly brazen and egregious form of victimization in a crisis that has seen more than its fair share of people being taken advantage of. Not only do distressed homeowners who pay for these fraudulent loan modifications lose valuable financial resources, they also lose time. And when the foreclosure clock is ticking and every day counts, time is a resource almost as precious as money. We are very grateful for the partnership with City Council that has produced the proposed ordinance. This proposed ordinance to increase the protections available to Angelino consumers against loan modification fraud further solidifies the city's leadership role in creating innovative solutions to the problems caused by the mortgage loan mess. And the mayor looks forward to signing it into law. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chuck?
Good morning. When I was going through getting a mortgage thing on my housing, you know, the problem was brokers, lenders, escrow agents, real estate agents, and the city housing department and related agencies were not on the same page. And you know what? That was why a lot of people lost their homes, because they weren't on the same page. And I noticed it says here, regulate mortgage modification consultants to regulate. Define that. You know what? Maybe they should be city certified. Maybe they should be qualified by a one-day program like the ethics committee does, where you go and see them. And because there's a lot of unqualified people. And what they did before, we don't need another problem like we did in the mortgage thing, where people got sucked into things because people were greedy and they wanted to make money. But if they're going to have consultants and regulate, well, good. Certify them. Make sure they're qualified. They all need to be on the same page, so all the agencies work together. When I went through a situation with the mortgage thing, it didn't work that way. A lot of people paid heavily, and they all said, gee, you know, it was all about money. Well, in something like this, consultants should be certified and qualified and go through a thing with the agencies that are in there, so that people don't get sucked in on something that they're going to lose their life savings or their homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. We've just been joined by Councilman Ed Reyes, so we do have a quorum. Mr. City Attorney, can the items we voted on earlier, can we just put Mr. Reyes on as an aye, and it won't be a communique from the chair, but...
Right, that would be items 1 and 2 and 4 through 7.
Yes. Okay, so I now have Michael Chung and Dorothy Herrera Settlage. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did.
Hey. Michael, you're first.
Morning, council members. My name is Michael Chung, and I'm a foreclosure attorney at the Los Angeles Center for Law and Justice. The center has provided services to low-income residents in the East LA Boyle Heights area for over 35 years. The center has represented several clients who have been the victims of foreclosure modification scams. We see the pernicious effects that these unscrupulous individuals and companies are having on our community every day. Families already behind on their mortgage will pay thousands of dollars to mortgage modification scammers. For these families, every last dollar counts. Foreclosure modification scammers prey on distressed homeowners' vulnerabilities by promising to modify their loans for an upfront fee. These empty promises steer homeowners away from legitimate, HUD-certified nonprofit organizations. These organizations can realistically evaluate whether a homeowner will qualify for a modification based on their financial situation, and they don't charge any fees. Without exception, we see that the scammers advise the homeowners to stop paying their mortgages, paving the way for near certain foreclosures. Currently, these scammers are able to operate with impunity because they target homeowners before they have received notices of default. The proposed regulation ordinance is a good first step in curtailing the activities of the modification scammers. Regulating mortgage foreclosure service providers prior to the notice of default would fill a major gap in state law. Moreover, creating a private cause of action that awards treble damages, attorney's fees, and costs would make it worthwhile for attorneys to file lawsuits not only to get restitution for our clients, but also to put these scammers out of business through injunctive relief. Consequently, we support the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Dorothy Herrera Sutledge. I'm a senior attorney at the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, and we've been involved in representing homeowners in LA and in foreclosure defense for decades. Right now, we've supplemented the services we're providing, and we're seeing maybe 40 to 50 face-to-face people in default or in foreclosure. I would estimate that at least 50% of them have already paid a so-called foreclosure consultant anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 to, in some instances, perhaps a little bit more for meaningless service. So we support this ordinance. We think it's an important consumer protection tool for Los Angeles homeowners. I have to second what my colleagues here have commented on. The written contract, the rescission, the triple damages is important because what's happening is people are being diverted from legitimate services. I have no objection to a well-informed homeowner paying a knowledgeable professional for assistance on this, but that's not what's happening. And so people, money that they're going to need to kind of work out or even to relocate is being diverted here. And a lot of the problems that we're seeing now were contributed to by real estate licensees with conditional licenses that didn't know what they were doing and got people into bad loans. And I have a strong suspicion that many of the people that are involved in this have just changed roles, and that's what they're doing. So I support this, and I think that it should be combined with a campaign to educate homeowners. And I know that some of that is going on right now, but I think it needs to be supplemented on legitimate services. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Garcetti, I guess, we've had hustlers since the beginning of time.
Yep.
Some things just don't change. Please.
Good morning, council members. Hakan Mordezai, Housing Department. As you've heard and as many of you are very aware, this is a very big problem that's growing, and it is in fact feeding off of and employing the same people who perpetuated the mortgage fraud that we are dealing with the fallout from. I want to thank Council President Garcetti and the Mayor's Office for their assistance in bringing this ordinance expeditiously as possible before this committee and the full council. The issues that have been raised here are, in a way, the opportunities for fraud have increased because of the federal assistance that's now available, including the assistance from the Obama administration through the Homeowners Affordability and Stability Plan. And what this ordinance seeks to do is, first off, this ordinance requires a written contract. And I think the need for that is put forth by some of the public testimony we received. It requires that contact information be provided in the contract. It requires that the contract be written in the same language as is principally used to negotiate the contract. It requires that the contract state in 14-point bold-faced type that the owners can cancel for 7 calendar days within the signing. It prohibits payment in advance of providing services, which is very important because how this scam often gets perpetrated is that somebody contacts an homeowner who is in a very vulnerable situation and promises them the world, takes their money, and disappears. It's not even that they don't provide a good service, they actually don't provide no service. And it also requires a form of notice of cancellation be provided. It prohibits taking an interest in the property, which is another scam, a corollary that's perpetuated in this type of fraud. It attaches liability to the representatives of the salespeople of the mortgage modification consultant. As you know, layering is a way that scam artists use to avoid liability, and what this ordinance does is it attacks that issue directly. And it provides for trouble damages and attorney's fees in a civil action, which of course is very important to getting proper legal representation to address this issue. And I turn it over to the city attorney's office. Is there anything else?
It's Suzanne Spillane, City Attorney's Office, Housing Division. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions, and it's been a pleasure to work with you on this.
Mr. Garcia?
Thank you. Let me start by thanking our chair, as always, who worked quickly to organize this, and without whom we couldn't have moved forward with this. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me thank the Housing Department and the City Attorney's Office as well for their quick dispatch of this. In the midst of a crisis, it shows government can be nimble and can address people's needs. Usually when we think about ordinances and government moving, it's years, and we've done this in a matter of weeks. And lastly, I want to thank the mayor and the mayor's office for their good work on this, too. It's been a pleasure to partner with you, and thank you for your very strong and eloquent words on this. I think everything's been laid out. People know what the problem is right now. I also want to thank the legal aid community as well, in the broadest sense, and the folks who have come here and who are on the front lines of actually defending these families and defending these homeowners who, you know, every logical reason this should be a crime, but yet is not criminalized. And so it's such a gray area. We look forward to more federal aid to assist those who need legal aid and public interest lawyers to assist them. At the same time, the trebling of damages hopefully will bring some of your colleagues from the private sector in as well, because there's a buck to be made for them in a positive sense against some of these scammers. But thank you for being at the front line of that defense. And we just see the numbers are so high that it's we know how overburdened you are as well with this. The folks right now, the individuals and companies that are posing as foreclosure consultants for unsuspecting homeowners, they've been taking this money and providing almost no help, as has been said. To hear some of these upfront fees, people must not have much more than $5,000 in the account when they're paying that all out, and it's kind of like their Hail Mary last attempt to try to save their homes, thinking that these folks may be able to provide them with something. And because there's so little knowledge, one of the first things to anybody who's listening, and for all of us as council members to continue to publicize, there is free help out there. We were lucky enough to host our Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Sean Donovan, last week here in Los Angeles, and we were in front of a foreclosed home in South Los Angeles in Miss Perry's district. But there he plugged both the website the government has set up, makinghomeaffordable.gov, and a hotline, which we here in Los Angeles can very proudly say we are at the forefront of setting up. It was almost 2.5 years ago, at the tip of this iceberg of a crisis, that just in the portico downstairs we had a press conference for the Hope Line, which then became a national service under the Bush administration. Ironies of irony, but now is a national hotline that people can call, 888-995-HOPE. And Operation Hope, which is based here in Los Angeles, but a national organization, was integral in helping get that up. You can get counseling for free. But anybody who is listening out there, do not, and you're going to engage in a foreclosure workout, do not pay an upfront fee. Do not pay an upfront fee, and insist on having a contract. This legislation will make that law. So, you know, while state law regulates you once you get into, once a notice has been filed and a homeowner becomes delinquent, there's really this gray area now with folks who are being preyed on at the precise moment government is trying to help. And loan modification has been at the center of the president's foreclosure strategy, but making sure that we direct families to the right places is going to be very critical. And it's not just Secretary Donovan. You know, we've seen Secretary Geithner and Attorney General Holder who've been waging an awareness campaign to alert homeowners to possible fraud. But if LA leads the way and actually does this first, we hope this will sweep across the nation. Other localities can do this, and perhaps we can even get some national legislation as well on this. So this is but a first step, but a really important first step. I thank my colleagues for their support, and I thank everybody for their hard work on this. And Mr. Chair, I would love to see it move forward. There are a couple amendments that, by the clerks here, I think I passed all mine out, that I wanted to add here. One was to instruct the city attorney prior to the ordinance. You got this one? Yeah, I don't know for the public. Actually, maybe there's extras you have there. If anybody from the public wants to get them, we can just ask them from the clerk. But just really briefly, it's add a requirement that any contract include 14-point bold type. So it was not for you, Mr. Chair. Don't worry. Okay. It's for all the people out there who need 14-point bold type. That also informs folks of where they can go for free help, and then also to put an urgency clause in this for obvious reasons as well.
All right. Mr. Reyes, do you have any questions?
No, just that I think I need 14-point bold type. But,
we can make it 18 for you.
No, I just wanted to say thanks for getting this out there as soon as you did, and I also want to thank my staff for working, and Herb, your staff, and everyone that put this together, Councilman Garcetti, great job. My concern still is we still have a lot of the fly-by-nights. They're posting up notices up on telephone poles, and making these urgent statements, and we can help you. Do we have any way of getting someone to investigate those because of the fraudulence that they are prepared?
We've actually been calling those, Mr. Reyes,
You
to
have?
try to see, we've been calling them directly, and I don't know if the Housing Department or City Attorney has been, but our staff has been doing that to see if some of these are scams that we can then direct the City Attorney's office to.
So do we have a record of those?
We informally have been doing it, but I don't know if there's anything more formally that's being done either by Housing or City Attorney's office, but we're going to continue to kind
Well,
of...
shouldn't we publicize that, or just make people aware these are not, they're not doing what they're saying? Or is there a way to pronounce that in different languages? Because it's the most vulnerable that are desperate, and they call these numbers, and then they get sucked into that scam.
Mercedes Marquez, Housing Department. I think that a couple of things that we should consider as a city is I'm not sure that it is actually legal to have all those signs all over the place, right? So, I'm wondering what the court, this now becomes an enforcement issue more from the point of view of street services, other municipal services.
Building and safety. Yes.
Building and safety, right? Maybe it's time to start talking about taking them down, right? And a separate, some separate ordinance related to more on the public safety side about fines and other things if you put them up, right? Because they're getting free advertising on city property, essentially. So I think we should look at those things.
Okay.
The other big issue, though, for us, ultimately, is what we're doing here is, we're leading the way like we did on evictions, like we've done, people still in other cities are amazed that we actually passed an eviction moratorium. And, here we are. I've said that to the federal government, and they don't really know what to respond when we offer that as an option. I do think that one thing that we face, though, is the issue of advertising. What the Housing Department does not have, never has had, right, is any kind of funding to actually get the word out in a meaningful way. I would ask you to consider, as part of perhaps the CDBG, that one-time stimulus, a little money to actually advertise what the law will be, and help.
The sign companies, I don't think, I don't know if any of us want to directly contact sign companies, but I'm sure if the Housing Department did, the Hope Hotline is all around this town on
Yes.
a bunch of the Vista, I think, is one of the companies that did it.
But you know what, Mr.
And they could put
President?
something up there,
What I think it was Ms. Setlich, when she spoke and talked about we need to do some kind of education program. Maybe we should have the staff, Andrew, you take the lead and talk with Mr. Garcetti's office and Ed's, and then, with the CLA, maybe we can come up with some proposal as to a common sense approach to try to educate the public. I think we should really try to come up with something quickly.
Would this be an opportunity for the bank's commitment to community service?
It could be.
They could they have their community, the CRA commitments.
They're back in black.
And so if they can...
Well, not so much CRA commitments, but general goodwill.
But people know where the money goes. And so that they go to their bank, and if they can announce it when they're cashing their checks, the check cashing services.
The Housing Department would welcome help on for us, this is really the most difficult problem. Because one thing is also advertising the eviction issues, just getting it out there. And that's something we just don't have that at our disposal. So a committee such as the one that the chairman is proposing would be of enormous help, and of course the Housing Department will be right there to staff you.
I think because this is, yes, Mr. City Attorney.
No, just as an aside on this, in order not to have a Brown Act problem, we would have to have less than a quorum of committee staff involved with this.
So we just won't have you in? We won't have you involved?
Two members of the
this is what I want to do. You will make sure that we're legal. I'd like to convene a meeting of all of the staff that work to make this committee, the committee that it is. I'd like for you guys to meet this week. You want a rep from the Housing Department, and I'd like to have some recommendations by next week. And then we can, firm it up and try to come up with something that works. And I think that when you guys meet, you should, everything that's been said, factor that in. We do need to partner with the private sector. I would think that they would want to help. I would think that it's in their best interest to do so. And I think within a week, we can come up with a way to get this message out, because people are, as we speak, somebody's calling one of these guys or companies and giving them $2,000 or $5,000 or whatever. So that's something. Andrew, you take the lead and you talk with Neil. Make sure that we're legal. If you have to, then maybe it should just be our office and Mr. Reyes's office, if that meets legal muster. Mercedes, you had something?
As we meet, there are resources. The Housing Rights Center has a hotline for fraud. We'll talk about this at another motion. But there are lots of things evolving. There's also the city's new, kind of sister nonprofit, Restore Neighborhoods LA. So there are now ways for donations to be made. Right, we can now handle what we couldn't handle before in terms of getting the word out.
Okay, so like I said, my office will take the lead in convening that meeting. If there are no more questions and no more statements from the public, without objection, we'll adopt the city attorney's report and draft the ordinance with the amendments. That item is done. Thank you all. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, now we will recess the regular meeting and go to the special agenda item, which is item 10. So if we could read item 10, Ms. Barclay.
Item 10 is a report from the Los Angeles Housing Department in response to motion Reyes, Wesson, Perry, relative to a report back on the availability and adequacy of third-party independent review of home loan documentation to ensure that borrowers are offered fair terms.
Okay, and we've been joined by Councilmember Jan Perry.
We got a majority in this, just in this motion.
Yeah, we're cooking with gas. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Yolanda Chavez with the Housing Department. In order to assess whether there's review services for loan documentation or pre-purchase a service and whether there's a tracking of bad lenders, we surveyed 7 of the 10 HUD-certified home buying counseling agencies that serve the city. We focused on the 7 because these 7 are not only HUD certified, but they're also the 7 that are on the list of LHD's approved home buyer counseling agencies. And so in order to be HUD certified, they have to meet certain standards, and also in order to be on the LHD list, our homeownership staff, homeownership program staff, actually review the curriculum and visit the agencies to ensure that their services are adequate. What we found was that although the majority of these agencies provide, in fact, 6 out of the 7 provide pre-purchase review of loan documents, there is really no way that, or no unified way to refer, that they refer bad lenders, or when they see lenders that may be providing unfair terms, they do steer the borrowers away from these loans, or potential borrowers, but there's no, they're not referring anything that they may consider to be predatory to the Housing Rights Center, and some of them refer to legal services, but there's no follow-up, or so there's really no sense of what happens after they refer these quote-unquote bad loans or bad lenders. The County Department of Consumer Affairs tracks some of these, but they don't provide any information on patterns or lenders or lists. They also refer to legal services. The State Department of Consumer Affairs basically refers to legal services, but they can't tell you what the result is. They do not track any of what quote-unquote bad lenders. In saying all that, what we find at this point is that the real problems that we see out there is not so much with potential borrowers receiving unfair terms in their loans, because as you know, since with the foreclosure crisis, there's been a credit tightening, and so what we really find today is that the real problem are scams, because the real issue and what counseling agencies are seeing today is that homeowners are actually coming for help to prevent foreclosures, not so much to review documents for new loans. And so what we're asking is that you give us some more time to come back with recommendations on, one, to ensure that there's actually some way to refer some of these, when they do see any of these bad lenders, quote-unquote bad lenders, to the Housing Rights Center and to other enforcement agencies, to really do more research on how county consumer affairs, state consumer affairs handle this and handle these type of cases, and how we could actually get a better sense of some of these, if they actually have any type of lists. And also to come back with recommendations on how we could centralize some of this data. Of course, part of the challenge, as you all know, is that there's really no clear definition of predatory lending. But we are hoping that with some of the discussions in Washington on adding more regulations to lenders and lending practices, that we will see some of that come out of D.C. And finally, to be able to track a lot of the fraudulent foreclosure related activity, I think as was discussed in item 9, because that's really key in terms of what's happening in the city today.
So we don't have a either statewide or federal or even countywide standard that allows us to put a grade, if you will, on the nature, the integrity, or the responsibility of these entities who are performing these types of actions that are taking advantage of people, correct?
Well, it's kind of even beyond that. I mean, when you just deal in the, let's say, in the legitimate market, right? We have these agencies, the 7 agencies that are all providing service. So let's start just with the good guys, okay? Among the good guys, there are no standards, right? So because there's no definition of predatory, right, or what a good term, what good loans terms are for loan modification, every agency has a slightly different standard and a different process for referral or non-referral. So one of the first things we have to do, and this is, our report, is we have to get the good guys on the same page, right, with us. So we got to deal with that first. At the same time, we have to deal with the scams that already exist and that are coming, right? We know right now that we're in an evolving relationship. We know that bankruptcy rules are being worked out in the federal, in the federal system. Something will come as a result of that. We know that there are new regulations about good loans. Something will come, and a scam will be developed around that, right? We know that the new Obama loan modification program, scams are developing around that. So the idea is that we have to figure out a system to handle scams, whatever they may be, even though we don't foresee what they will be, but we can certainly bank on that people find a way to take advantage of others. So we're trying, on the one hand, to marry all of the good guys together with us so that we have real data, because we have another concern. Eventually, all of this stuff is going to lead to funding opportunities. I'm certain of it. It's going to lead to funding opportunities. And what concerns me is what concerned the Housing Department and then you all a year and a half ago, is that we had no way to collect data that put us in a position to lead. That's the position we're in on this data on predatory lending and on fraud. With all of these different standards, right, you're talking pomegranates to apples to oranges to piñas, right? It's all over the place. We won't be able to compete.
That was pineapple.
Well, yeah, but those who, So we're trying to figure out how we actually are going to gather ourselves to move forward as one entity. One of the issues we face is that so much of the funding that comes to these entities does not come through the city, right? The counseling money does not come through the city. So we have to figure out what are the incentives to get everybody to report systematically.
But given these different standards, if I may, Mr. Chair, you go to a restaurant, you see A, a B, and a C,
Yes.
right? And right now, the way the credit had been working in the past, if your credit is not as good, you pay a higher fee because you're high risk. So these standards, what we're saying is that we have to stratify how these standards are being perceived by those who are making these decisions, and we don't even have a baseline.
Nothing.
Okay. Now, the enforcement part of this, I mean, again, this is an evolving process. When we look at the senior in South LA or East LA who might still have a little bit of equity left, who didn't bite the last round, they still have something left in their property. Aren't those so few that we can at least find out, I mean, how do we target this information? Because there's so many
Well, that's
cases.
what we're trying to figure out. With the legitimate agencies, how do we target? Our sense at the Housing Department is that your motion, Mr. Reyes, and Mr. Garcetti's motion, they're quite tied together. So the efforts actually of this committee, regardless of the motions, they're all tied together. So in many ways, we're treating them as one larger umbrella movement, right? Because we have to make sure that as we go forward, they all work with one another, including what would be on the billboard, right? That they're all feeding one another. So that's what we're grappling with, and that's why we want a little bit more time to come back to you with a more integrated, thoughtful process about this.
I appreciate
You know
that.
what, Mr. Reyes, are you finished? Yes. Oh, because I want to at least get the vote on this while we have Mr. Garcetti here. So, without objection, we'll adopt the Housing Department's report. And did you come up with was it 45 days or?
60 days.
60 days?
Is 45 days too tight?
It's a lot of work and lots of coordination with people outside of the
Why don't we
city.
shoot for 45 days?
Okay.
And if not,
We'll do what we can.
I know you will. Okay, then, without objection, so moved. So I guess now, Mr. City Attorney, we return to the regular agenda
Item 8.
to hear item 8.
But we won't have a quorum, it appears now.
So we'll have to do it as a communique from the chair.
Yes, sir. Item 8 is a motion, Weston Garcetti, relative to a coordinated process to prevent and abate fraudulent activity in foreclosed properties.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney, let me ask you a question. And this just for the future, because I probably can't catch Mr. Garcetti now. In the future, could we vote on an item, and then let's say a member then left and have a discussion?
Well, you would have certainly at least had to have public comment before, because the public comment has to take place before or during consideration of the item before the vote.
Well, see, let's just using this item, for example, there's no request for public comment. In order to vote on it, would a member have to stay to hear the presentation? Then we could vote and then discuss it more?
It's an interesting question. Let me check into that.
Could you check that out? Then I might be able to rock and roll some things around here. Okay. Good morning. Ms. Barclay, let's read item 8.
Okay. Item 8 is a motion, Weston Garcetti, relative to a coordinated process to prevent and abate fraudulent activity in foreclosed properties.
Who wants to lead off?
I'll start. Good morning. Doug Swag with the Housing Department. As this motion states, as we've grappled with the foreclosure issue and prepared for the neighborhood stabilization program and met with real estate professionals, we've become increasingly aware of fraudulent activity with respect to squatters moving into properties, and even worse activities such as people taking over properties and then falsely renting them to tenants, and even going as far as preparing false rental documents, lease documents, and so forth to take advantage of folks to collect rents.
Would you mind speaking closer to the microphone? We can't really hear you very well. Thank you.
And so we've, been made aware of all this fraudulent activity, and it's not just squatters moving in, it's folks taking advantage of renters and collecting rents from them, producing false documents. And this motion is designed to assist us to deal with that, and we believe it ties in closely with another motion that Council President Garcetti and Councilmember Smith had authored to set up a registry system by which we can register foreclosed and vacant properties to allow us to track their status and where they're at, and to enforce ordinances that we come up with to deal with these issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Haka to explain how we've related these two.
But before you start, I have to acknowledge that for me anyway, I have the pleasure of meeting on a monthly basis with Mercedes and Yolanda, and so they educate me. I was unaware and shocked by some of the stories that they told me. Now, and you referenced, renters being taken advantage of. Another component that I heard was that these individuals can stay in the home and then force the legitimate owner to give them relocation money, and they're not even supposed to be there in the first place. So this is, so now whenever I drive down the street or when I walk my neighborhood, I've got a couple of vacant houses, I'm always looking and is anybody
You're not going to rent, are you?
But this is disturbing, and I just thought it made sense that we have some kind of discussion, and I want to thank all of you for the work that you've done. So with that, I turn it back.
Mr. Chair, just one question on that, though, is what's the scale? I mean, we say a lot. I mean, can you give us a number? Okay, could you just give us some, I think it would be astonishing if we had a ballpark figure.
So maybe before Haka talks about the registry ordinance that they're working on, maybe we could have the representative from LAPD talk about what they're seeing out in the field.
But
Right.
do we have how big is this? What do we think?
What's the scale?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Dennis Shirey. I'm the acting commanding officer of Commercial Crimes Division, SHIREY.
Well, you had that look about you when I first
All right. It's a good look, right?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. It's just something.
Authoritative look.
Growing up where I grew up, your radar kind of, Anyway, welcome.
Warning.
Don't,
Okay.
We don't track data on this, but within Commercial Crimes Division, we have a real estate fraud unit that handles fraudulent loans and things like that. Not exactly the situation you're talking about. So, but they're aware by calls from our patrol divisions that it's an increasing problem, and I think probably mostly in the San Fernando Valley seems to be where we're getting the most calls. And I know the deputy chief out in the valley is very concerned about this. So it is on the upswing. As the gentleman to my right mentioned, there's a lot of different textures to this. On the bottom level, you got the out-and-out squatters that just break in, and the police go there as a result of somebody calling, and they can't provide any rental agreements, or they have no explanation for being there. That's easy. That's a trespass. But then you get into the situation which we're frequently finding is the rental scams, where these people are actually victims who paid 2 months' money up front and moved in there, and then these foreclosed properties, they're under a property manager, they want these people out, and then they call the police. They're not supposed to be there. We didn't rent to these people, but these people have rental agreements. So, we cannot just put these people out. We take a crime report and go through a process. So that's really a dilemma for our patrol officers, because it's not clear cut. And then there's the others that perhaps have a rental agreement as a ruse to stay there. So those are difficult. And then, of course, the only proper civil process is the unlawful detainer. And we now have property managers that want the Los Angeles Police Department to do this, and really that's a civil process that's handled by the Sheriff's Department. So we get into that dilemma. So I can't give you any numbers. I can tell you it is on the upswing, probably because there's so many foreclosed properties out there that have been vacated.
And we don't have anybody from DWP here, do we? Or we do? Hi, come on up. Oh, we don't have enough chairs. But I got one question. Good morning. If I remember correctly, Yolanda, you indicated that people are, you know, they somehow get the DWP bill or whatever connection.
Yes, if we don't have any history on the property of any squatters or illegal tenants living at the location, we will sign anyone for service without documentation or the rental or lease agreement.
Okay, so you could actually be a squatter, go in, call DWP, and get your stuff turned on.
Right. We cannot deny service to anyone unless we feel that it's an illegal, they're, you know, trying to steal money from the department, or if we feel that it's different circumstances.
I understand.
You know, for one, we currently, yesterday, as a matter of fact, I did get a property where there's drug dealers and squatters at the location. The neighbors called and reported that there's illegal conversions. We did turn off the services for non-payment, and what they did is they're running the wires from the half address. So what we did is we went and sent our revenue security department out to the location, and they did find the illegal conversions.
I mean, I just find this amazing.
Wow.
I mean, it shows that
We're desperate.
well, and it shows that human beings will do just about, I mean, gosh. But anyway, now,
Good morning again.
thank you for coming.
Can I have a question for the DOP?
Yeah, I mean, this
Now,
is,
if you're working with a certain set of forms currently, correct?
With the current,
There's certain forms you have that you work with. How you process your paperwork, you have certain standard forms that you work with, correct? When you're trying to verify ownership and/or legality.
right.
Given what the police are learning from the fraudulent paperwork, is there anything we can learn from their experience that might change how you conduct your business so that we can get to what's real and what isn't? Is that possible?
At this time, we have so much paperwork coming into our office, the collections department, where we have to verify tenancy. We try to locate the owners. Sometimes the owners just walk away from the location. We don't have information to contact the banks to see if they're new tenants or not.
But could you require that? That's what I'm trying to get at. That information that you're missing when a property owner, a legitimate property owner, is establishing their service, those pieces of information that you're missing, couldn't you add them to your existing forms to help you verify?
We take so many applications a day that we only do it on a case-by-case basis. If there's a delinquency bill pending at this time, we do require legal documentation. If there's no delinquent bill, we will sign the customer over the phone.
I see. All I'm suggesting is, if we're learning from LAPD and from the housing experience, a way to enhance what you already do, not to create more work, but to improve how records are kept, maybe that can help us.
But Councilman, I think the whole purpose of this registry is to be able to do just that. So I think Haka will respond.
I think yes, the points that you raise are really important ones in terms of getting proper information that can be made available to different enforcement agencies and the Department of Water and Power. If you recall, the CLA and Ms. Barkley are leading a multi-agency task force that's looking into setting up a foreclosure registry. And the foreclosure registry we were discussing how to work on existing systems and registries which may be out there, including ones that the banks are tentatively exploring, called the MERS system, and also the vacant building ordinance that is already a law in the city of Los Angeles. But the basic contours of this registry would be that the banks would be able to tell us when a property is vacant. First off, they would register when the property is foreclosed and also when they're vacant. And if and when it's vacant, then they would also complete a trespass authorization. I think this trespass authorization form will be a really important component in terms of the work that the Real Estate Fraud Act unit does in the police department. And also having that registry is exactly the kind of information that you're referring to, Councilman Reyes, that could be made available to the Department of Water and Power, so that the Department of Water and Power would actually have the data, the legal information they need to verify if this occupied unit is actually occupied without the approval of the owner or not. And that's the approach that we're taking in this discussion that we're having with the CLA, with Building and Safety, and the City Attorney's Office and the Mayor's Office.
It's amazing. Thank you. Amazing. Did Building and Safety did you have anything you wanted to add? I don't even know what questions to ask, because this is, when you first informed me, it blew my mind, and it even more so. Now, I guess I mean, so legitimately, a person could identify, locate an abandoned house that's been foreclosed. They could come in there, cut the grass, move in, put up curtains.
Rekey the whole property, or if it's multifamily, rekey all of the units, rent them out.
But I mean, literally, somebody, like the house 2 doors from me, if somebody moved in there, I wouldn't know. You know, I'd probably say hello to them.
Send them a piece of pie.
Yeah, or bring them Herb's famous spaghetti.
There you
I
go.
mean, so, officer, you verify that these are squatters or people that aren't supposed to be there. Then what can you actually do?
If we verified that they're bona fide squatters, then it's easy. We can remove them right there.
Okay, right
Yeah.
then.
Of course, we need some, party reporting there to lock up the residents, because that's a dilemma too. We can't just leave an open premise.
Right.
But generally, we have a party reporting that's there to take over the premise. So, and here's another thing, and because I got a call on this, they had a real dilemma in Southwest area, because you've got the property manager representing an REO, because it was owned by it had been foreclosed, who was trying to evict some tenants. And these tenants had a rental agreement. The man that executed the rental agreement says, I rightfully have ownership to this. We're in litigation. And yes, I authorized these people to stay. So it wasn't even clear who had ownership. So the only thing the police really can immediately do something on is where, like I said, you got people in there, they got no explanation, no paperwork. Okay, you're going trespass.
Let me ask this. Let's just say that Mr. Reyes and I come up with this scheme where we're going to, hey, I'm not going down alone.
Shooting partners in crime.
Mr. Reyes and I identify properties, and then we rent them, and we furnish these rental agreements or what have you. What can you do to the people that do that? I mean, because there's a group of people that are out there doing this. I guess this is the hustle day discussion in committee. There are people out there that are just doing this scam or as a hustle. So so I've got this fake company, and with fake names or whatever, what happens to, how do you even go about catching the people? So, first of all, what are they actually guilty of, and then how do you catch them?
Well, I think that our goal with this motion, as well as with the registry motion, is to find a way to make it easy for LAPD to be able to identify who are the scammers and who are the legitimate tenants of properties or owners of properties. And I'm assuming that once we are able to give them that information and the tools that they need to catch people, as you were describing them, that they would be able to file charges against these individuals. And I'm sure the detective here can confirm that, but that's really our goal, is to coordinate with LAPD, DWP, Building and Safety, and of course work with this registry motion to ensure that we can make it easy for people to identify these scams, and in particular LAPD, so that we could...
And also the banks.
Every 2 or 3 months, they change the name of their little outfit. And they probably have a P.O. box somewhere that they change, or,
Right. But I think you've also have seen that the FBI and other federal agencies are actually getting more involved in this because of this foreclosure crisis. So I also think that they would be especially helpful in these, in bigger scams, because a lot of these folks are probably, kind of mom and pop operations. Right.
Have we caught anybody that's acting as if they own property and are renting it out?
I can't answer that, sir, because our fraud unit doesn't handle those. Those would be at the patrol level, so I don't really know.
I bet that's a difficult problem.
Right. But I can tell you that when I spoke to Detective Camphouse, who's also with the fraud, property fraud division yesterday, she mentioned that they've been waiting for something like this because they're getting so many calls related to this issue, but they have no way to figure out who is saying the truth.
Did you ever had you heard of this?
No, well, but I was more aware of it in relation to how the gangs moving into these structures, and that's pretty overt. And so, how they're taking over units and houses, been going on forever, but now it's just more profound. But I did want to, when we reach a certain point where we feel comfortable that we have something to work with. When I'm dealing with zoning issues in Plum, I mean, you get very active groups, the homeowner associations, you get neighborhood councils, folks know how to fight what they don't want. If you give them information and how to become more vigilant, I'm not saying to be vigilantes, I'm saying be vigilant. I mean, there's a whole social network out there that we should be informing and stimulating to help the detectives and help the LAPD. Our biggest problem, thinking here in Los Angeles, is that we don't know who our neighbor is. Right. And so, do you think we can reach a point where we could have that type of discourse or information? I mean, something we could publicize, Mr. Chair, on Channel 35.
Yeah.
This is information that we need to get out there. I mean, everything we spoke to today, I think, has a place in Channel 35.
Definitely.
Public speaking, outlets. But do you feel we can reach that point once we get... How long do you think it'll take before we get this back?
Well, I think we could bring Dunn in immediately to get the word out to the neighborhood councils so that they can be vigilant on these issues, especially, as the detective said, in San Fernando Valley and in South LA, because that's where most of these reports are coming from. So I think we could do that immediately.
Okay.
Bring them into this discussion so they make their groups aware.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. It's just, we live in some very challenging times, just weird, and, desperation, people do things. Monday, I was walking the neighborhood. I get up early in the morning. I've got this new poodle that I adopted here, so I'm trying to train him. So the neighbors know that if they, at about 6:45, that's when they can get me. So I'm gonna, and so I'm
You have your caseworker with you? You have staff with you?
I saw two of my neighbors on Monday, and they pointed to this red truck. Beautiful truck, I mean, brand-new truck. And they said, we're concerned about this truck. We've seen it here for 2 days. We don't know if they're casing the joint or what have you. So I said to the neighbors, you know, maybe the guy's just sleeping here, you know, and you've noted it, and if you see it again, give me the license number and what have you. As we're talking, the guy starts the truck, brand new shiny truck, turns it around, he drives past, and I see he's got two hanging bags, you know, attached to the. So I'm walking saying, gosh, you know, my neighbors really, these guys, I wake up Tuesday, the sucker's in front of my house.
Does he have an extra bag?
Yeah, he had his hanging bag, whatever, and I kind of felt like, damn, I mean, so he's out, I mean, the world, I guess the point that I'm making is that nothing surprises me anymore, and I mean, this has got to be like a $30,000 truck. It's brand spanking new, and it shows he found a quiet neighborhood, and he just goes on different streets, and trust me, I looked for his butt this morning, he wasn't there. So it's just weird.
It's just the beginning, too.
We have to, I think it is just the beginning. So anyway, without objection, we'll adopt a motion. I think we have some amendments, and we'll ask that you report back as soon as possible, 45 days if that's possible. Thank you so much, and again, Mercedes and Yolanda, thank you for bringing this to my attention. It's just, life is weird. Then, Ms. Barclay, is there any more business before this committee?
No, sir.
Then this committee is adjourned. Thank everybody for coming.
Hi, Judy.